The salvage vessel Horizon Drift moved slowly through the debris field that surrounded a frozen moon in the Kepler 442 system. The ship was old, patched together with spare parts and hope. Inside the cramped engineering bay, Juno wiped thick grease from his callous hands and stared at the scanner readings with confusion growing in his chest. "This can't be right," he muttered to himself. He adjusted the scanner's calibration for the third time, then a fourth, hoping the readings would change. They didn't. Captain Mira walked into the bay. She was a veteran spacer with more scars than patience, and her eyes had seen more failed salvage runs than successful ones. She leaned over Juno's shoulder, squinting at the display screen. "What V you got?" Her voice was rough from years of breathing recycled air. Energy signatures, deep beneath the ice. Juno's fingers moved across the console, pulling up layer after layer of scan data. They're old, really old. Maybe thousands of years, maybe more. He pointed at the screen. And they're in a pattern. Perfect geometric shapes. This isn't natural. Myra's eyes narrowed. The crew of 6 had been salvaging derelict stations and abandoned outposts for 8 months straight. Every find had been worthless junk or already picked clean by other scavengers. They were running low on fuel, lower on food, and their spirits were at rock bottom. This could be their salvation, or just another cruel joke from the universe. "Could be a sensor glitch," Mira said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I ran diagnostics twice. The sensors are fine." Juno pulled up a 3-dimensional map of the moon's surface. Whatever's down there is buried under 50 meters of ice, but it's definitely there. And it's big, Captain. Really big. From her station near the front of the ship, Hannah called out. She was their pilot, young but skilled, with reflexes that had saved them more than once. "The ship's AI is throwing up warnings. Contamination protocols. It wants us to keep our distance." Mira waved her hand dismissively. "The AI sees ghosts in every shadow. It flagged a radiation warning last week that turned out to be someone's broken microwave." She turned back to Juno. "How big are we talking?" Juno manipulated the display, and a wire-frame structure appeared. It looked like a massive dome or chamber buried in the ice, at least 200 meters across. The energy readings are weak but stable. Whatever it is, it's still got power after all this time. The rest of the crew had gathered now. Taemin, their other engineer, stood with his arms crossed. Doyen and Suho, the cargo handlers, exchanged glances. They all knew what finding ancient technology could mean. If it was functional, if it was valuable, they could retire. If it was dangerous, they could die. "We need to be smart about this," Taemin said. "Unknown alien structures don't usually come with welcome mats." "Which is exactly why we send someone down first to scan it properly before we commit the whole team," Mira said. She looked at Juno. "Suit up. You're going down there." Juno's stomach tightened, but he nodded. This was a job. This was always a job. An hour later, Juno sat in a small shuttle, descending to the moon's thin atmosphere. The ice below was gray and ancient, cracked in places by meteor impacts. His hands were steady on controls, but his mind raced with possibilities. What could survive thousands of years buried in ice? What kind of civilization built things that lasted so long? The shuttle landed near the largest energy signature. Juno stepped out onto the frozen surface, his boots crunching on ice that might be older than human civilization. He activated his suit's heating elements and picked up his scanning equipment. "Command, do you read me?" he said into his helmet comm. "Loud and clear," Hannah's voice replied. "We're tracking you. Energy signatures are getting stronger as you approach the coordinates." Juno walked carefully across the ice. His scanner showed the structure was directly below him. He set up a drilling laser, a small one meant for taking core samples. The beam cut through the ice like butter, sending up plumes of vapor that froze instantly in the thin air. After 20 minutes, the laser broke through into empty space. Juno peered down into the hole. Darkness stared back at him. He dropped a light stick, and it fell for several seconds before hitting something solid far below. "There's a chamber down there," he reported. "I'm going in." He secured a rope and rappelled down through the ice. The temperature dropped even further as he descended. His suit's lights cut through the darkness, and what they revealed made Juno's breath catch in his throat. He was inside a massive chamber made of black glass that reflected his lights like perfect mirrors. The walls were seamless and smooth, impossible without advanced technology. And at the center of the chamber, sitting on a raised platform, was a sarcophagus made of crystalline material that seemed to glow from within. Juno's boots touched the floor, and he unclipped from the rope. He walked slowly toward the sarcophagus, his scanner held out before him. The device went crazy, readings jumping and fluctuating wildly. "Command, you're seeing this, right?" Juno's voice was barely a whisper. "Copy that," Hannah replied, her voice tight with excitement. "What is it?" "I have no idea, but it's definitely not human." The sarcophagus was covered in glyphs and symbols that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. They flowed like water across the surface, rearranging themselves into patterns that hurt his eyes to follow. Juno leaned closer to examine the seal, where all the glyphs converged at the top of the tomb. Ancient dust, undisturbed for countless years, drifted up from his movement. The particles tickled his nose through the suit's air filter. He felt the sneeze building and tried desperately to hold it back. He couldn't. The pressure was too much. Juno sneezed hard inside his helmet. The sound was muffled, but a tiny amount of moisture escaped through his suit's ventilation filter. A single drop of condensation landed on the tomb's crystalline surface. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. The chamber was silent, except for Juno's breathing. Then the tomb exploded with light. Juno stumbled backward as the chamber erupted in blinding golden light. The glyphs on the sarcophagus burned bright, racing across the walls like liquid fire. The entire structure trembled beneath his feet, and a deep voice boomed through the chamber. It spoke in a language Juno had never heard, yet somehow he understood every word. "The heir has returned." Holographic images exploded into existence all around him. Star maps filled the air, showing galaxies and systems he didn't recognize. Ancient cities rose and fell in projections, civilizations of creatures that looked nothing like humans. Equations and symbols spiraled through the space, complex beyond anything Juno had ever seen. "Juno, what's happening down there?" Captain Myra's voice screamed through his helmet comm. "I don't know. The tomb just activated. I'm getting out of here." Juno ran for the rope, his boots slipping on the smooth floor as another tremor shook the chamber. The voice continued speaking, echoing through passages that extended far deeper than any scan had shown. As Juno climbed frantically up the rope toward the surface, he felt something watching him. Something vast and ancient had just woken up, and it knew exactly where he was. 12 hours later, the horizon drift was no longer alone. Juno sat in the medical bay, wrapped in a thermal blanket, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. Through the small viewport, he could see at least 7 alien vessels surrounding their ship. They had appeared within hours of the tomb's activation, drawn by signals the ruins had broadcast across multiple star systems. Captain Mira was in the corridor outside, her raised voice carrying through the thin walls as she argued with their uninvited guests. Juno could hear her threatening to blast anyone who tried to board without permission, but they both knew the horizon drift had no weapons worth mentioning. The door slid open. An alien entered, and Juno pressed himself back against the wall instinctively. The creature was insectoid, standing nearly 7 feet tall on 4 legs. Its body was covered in dark green chitin, and its multiple eyes glittered like black pearls. A small device attached to its throat chirped and clicked, translating its speech into words Juno could understand. "I am Velthra of the Kreshtar people, the human who opened the tomb. I must speak with him." Her mandibles clicked together in a rhythm that might have been speech in her own language. Juno looked up at her warily, still not trusting his voice. "I didn't open anything. I sneezed." "Precisely." Velthra's mandibles clicked again, and the translator interpreted it as amusement. "The architects seal their vaults with biological locks. Only those carrying specific genetic markers could access them. Your genetic material made contact with the seal. The tomb recognized you as an heir." "Architects? Heir?" Juno's mind was still catching up. "What are you talking about?" Velthra moved closer, and Juno noticed she was holding her upper limbs in a non-threatening posture. The architects were an ancient race. They existed billions of years before your species learned to make fire. They seeded genetic material across the galaxy, creating life on thousands of worlds. They left behind 7 installations, sealed vaults containing their knowledge and technology. These vaults were locked, waiting for their heirs to claim them. And you think humans are these heirs? Juno's voice cracked slightly. I do not think. The tomb confirmed it. Somehow, impossibly, your species carries the genetic markers the architects programmed into their locks. Velthra's translator chirped. You are one of the few beings in the galaxy who can access their legacy. Before Juno could respond, a voice spoke directly inside his mind. It was deep and ancient, patient as stone. Inheritor, I am the curator. We have much to discuss. Juno jumped up from the medical bed, looking around wildly. Did you hear that? Who said that? Hear what? Velthra's antennae twitched with concern. The voice continued, calm and steady in his thoughts. Do not be alarmed. I am the artificial intelligence left by the architects to guide their heirs. You have activated the first installation. 6 remain. I will guide you to your inheritance. There's a voice in my head. Juno said, his voice rising. It says it's the curator. It says there are 6 more installations. Velthra's entire body went still. The curator has bonded with you. This is significant. Very significant. Over the next few hours, the situation grew more complicated. Representatives from different alien species came aboard, each with their own demands. A delegation from the Galactic Council insisted that Juno surrender all access to the architect's technology for the good of all species. A military commander from the Sorix Empire offered protection in exchange for sharing whatever he found. Representatives from a Void Collective, a xenophobic alliance, declared that humans were thieves and must be eliminated before they could access more vaults. Juno sat through meeting after meeting, his head spinning. The curator spoke to him periodically, explaining things in terms he barely understood. The architects had been the galaxy's first great civilization. They had mastered creation itself, building technologies that seemed like magic, but they had also vanished, leaving only their sealed vaults behind. What happened to them? Juno asked the curator silently, thinking the question rather than speaking aloud. They destroyed themselves, the curator replied. Their power exceeded their wisdom. They created things that should not have been created. In the end, their own inventions consumed them. That night, Juno stood in the observation deck with Velthra. The alien scholar had appointed herself as advisor, though he wasn't sure why she was helping him. Why do you believe in this? Juno asked, that humans should have access to this technology? Velthra's mandibles moved in a complex pattern, because the architects chose you, not the Kreshtar, who have explored space for 10,000 years, not the Sorix, with their mighty empire, not any of the elder races. They chose a young species, barely out of your home system. There must be a reason. And if there isn't, what if it's just a cosmic accident? Then we will learn that together. Velthra turned to look at him with her multiple eyes. But I do not believe in accidents of this magnitude. Juno looked out at the alien ships surrounding them. Some wanted to help him. Others wanted to use him. A few wanted him dead. And somewhere out there were 6 more installations, waiting for him to find them. What do I do? He asked quietly. That, Velthra said, her translator chirping softly, is entirely up to you, Inheritor. The curator's lessons began immediately, and they were overwhelming. Every night, when Juno tried to sleep, his mind filled with visions. Ancient symbols scrolled through his thoughts like data streams. Technologies beyond human comprehension appeared in his dreams, machines that bent space and manipulated time. The history of civilizations that rose and fell millions of years before Earth even existed played out behind his closed eyes. Stop. Juno gasped on the 3rd night, sitting up in his bunk drenched in sweat. I can't process all of this. My brain isn't built for this. You must learn, the curator's voice echoed in his mind. The installations will not wait. Others seek them even now. Then teach me differently. Juno pressed his palms against his temples. You're doing this wrong. The curator's presence in his mind felt surprised. Impossible. This is the architect's methodology. It has been used for eons. Maybe it worked for them, but I'm human. Let me try my way. Juno took a deep breath. Show me one thing at a time. Let me work with my hands. I'm a mechanic, not a scholar. I learn by doing, not by having information dumped into my brain. There was a long pause. Then the curator said, Very well. We will attempt your method. The change was immediate. Instead of overwhelming data floods, the curator began showing Juno individual concepts. When Juno struggled to understand an alien power system, the curator related it to the engines he repaired daily. Ancient energy matrices became like circuit boards. Dimensional storage was explained as advanced compression, like fitting large cargo into small spaces. Juno's mechanical training, years of fixing broken ships with limited parts, helped him see patterns that others missed. The architect technology was complex, but it followed rules. Once he understood the basic principles, everything else began to make sense. 2 weeks later, they reached the second installation. It was located on a planet in neutral space, a world of red sand and ancient ruins. The Galactic Council had sent their best scholars. The Sorcs Empire dispatched their elite engineers. Even the Void Collective sent observers, watching from a distance. The installation was a massive pyramid of black metal, half buried in the desert. Unlike the first vault, this one had visible defenses. Automated systems hummed to life as they approached, scanning everyone who came near. A Kreshtar scholar named Telthan stepped forward first. He was considered the galaxy's leading expert on ancient civilizations. His team set up quantum computers and began running simulations, trying to calculate the correct sequence to open the pyramid's sealed door. The mathematical probability suggests a 7-dimensional lock. Telthan announced, his translator chirping. We will solve it within the hour. An hour passed, then 2, then 6. The computers produced thousands of possible solutions. None of them worked. Let me try, said Commander Rissa of the Sorcs Empire. She was a towering reptilian warrior, her scales gleaming like bronze armor. Ancient doors yield to ancient methods. She brought forward a massive plasma cannon, the kind used to breach fortified bunkers. Her soldiers aimed it at the pyramid's entrance and fired. The beam struck the door with enough force to melt starship hulls. The door didn't even warm up. The energy simply dissipated across its surface like water on stone. Rissa snarled in frustration. Impossible. Nothing withstands concentrated plasma. Other attempts followed. Sonic resonators, matter disruptors, gravitational manipulation, all failed. The door remained sealed, indifferent to their efforts. Juno watched it all, listening to the curator's quiet voice in his mind. The lock responds understanding, not force. It requires the Heir to comprehend its mechanism. Show me, Juno whispered. The curator displayed the lock structure in Juno's mind. It was incredibly complex, a puzzle of energy flows and biological recognition systems. But as Juno studied it, he began to see something familiar. The pattern reminded him of a cooling system he'd once repaired, where fluid had to flow through channels in exactly the right sequence to prevent overheating. I need to get closer, Juno said to Captain Mira. The scholars have been working on it for hours, she replied. What makes you think? Trust me, please. Mira hesitated, then nodded. Your funeral. Juno approached the door, while dozens of aliens watched. He could feel their skepticism, their doubt that a human from a barely spacefaring species could succeed where they had failed. He pushed it all aside and focused on the door. He pulled out his tools, a mechanics kit, simple instruments for working with electronics and metals. The alien observers whispered among themselves. What could such primitive tools accomplish? Juno knelt by the door and examined the seal. There were microscopic channels in the metal, invisible to the naked eye, but clear on his scanner. Energy flowed through them in a specific pattern, like blood through veins. But the flow was blocked in several places, disrupted by time and decay. It's not locked, Juno said aloud. It's broken. He pulled out a piece of wire from his kit, standard copper wiring used in ship repairs. Following the curator's guidance and his own instincts, he began creating bypasses. Where the ancient channels had failed, He routed the energy through new paths. He used a small welding torch to fuse connections, working with steady hands. Telfin approached, his antennae twitching with disbelief. "What are you doing? That's not how architect technology works." "Maybe not originally," Juno said, not looking up from his work. "But it'll work now." He connected the final bypass, a crude bridge made from spare parts and hope. Energy began flowing through the door again, following the new paths he created. The ancient mechanism groaned, trying to remember its purpose. Then, with a sound like thunder, the door began to open. The gathered aliens stood in stunned silence. Juno stood up, brushing red sand from his knees. He looked at his simple tools, then at the massive pyramid door swinging open before him. "That should not have worked," the curator said in his mind, and for the first time, Juno heard genuine surprise in the ancient intelligence's voice. "Yeah, well, it did." Juno allowed himself a small smile. Velthora approached, her mandibles clicking rapidly. "You bypassed the lock. You didn't solve it, you fixed it. No Heir has ever done such a thing." "No architect Heir, maybe," Juno replied. "But human mechanics learn to make things work with whatever we have. Sometimes the elegant solution is just making sure all the parts connect properly." Inside the pyramid, treasures of knowledge awaited. But the real discovery had already been made. The architect's technology wasn't perfect or infallible. It could break. It could fail. And when it did, sometimes all it needed was someone willing to think differently, to see the problem not as an impossible puzzle, but as a machine that just needed the right repair. Commander Rissa watched Juno enter the pyramid. Her reptilian eyes narrowed. She had wanted that technology for her empire. She had wanted the power it represented. And this human had just proven he could access it in ways no one else could. Her hand moved to the weapon at her side. Plans began forming in her mind, dark plans, ambitious plans. Plans that would soon put everyone in danger. The third installation turned into a massacre. Juno had just activated the vault's inner chamber when Commander Rissa's soldiers attacked. Plasma fire lit up the ancient corridors as her troops tried to capture him alive. She wanted the curator's bond, wanted the ability to access all 7 installations herself. "Go! Run!" Captain Mira shouted, firing her pistol at armored swords warriors. The weapon was nearly useless against her shields, but it bought precious seconds. Juno ran through twisting passages with Hannah and Tamine close behind. Behind them, he heard Mira screaming orders, heard the sounds of fighting. His heart hammered his chest as guilt threatened to overwhelm him. This was his fault. He'd trusted Rissa. He believed her offers of protection were genuine. "She's using us." Tamine gasped as they sprinted through a collapsing tunnel. She was always using us. They barely made it back to their shuttle. As they blasted away from the planet's surface, Juno watched the installation below. Rissa's forces were swarming it, trying to extract whatever technology they could. The trust between them, fragile as it had been, was completely shattered. Later, aboard the Horizon Drift, the crew gathered in the common room. Mira had made out alive, bleeding from a shoulder wound, but alive. She slammed her fist on the table, making everyone jump. "This ends now," she said. "We're done playing heir to ancient aliens. We need to stop this before more people die." "Stop how?" Juno asked quietly. Hannah leaned forward, her pilot's eyes intense. "We destroy the installations. All of them. If no one can access them, no one can fight over them. The technology dies with the architects, where it belongs. That's not our decision to make." Tamine argued. The knowledge in those vaults could help billions. Medical advances, clean energy, technologies that could save lives. We can't just destroy it all. We also can't let it fall into the wrong hands. Hannah shot back. "You saw what Rissa tried to do, and she's just one of dozens who want this power. Or we finish what we started." Tamine said, his voice growing stronger. "We get to the 7th installation first. We get the Genesis engine, and we make the choice ourselves. We decide how this ends." Juno sat silent, listening to them argue. In his mind, the curator pressed forward relentlessly. "You must continue, inheritor, For installations remain. The path is clear. Nothing about this is clear, Juno thought back. Over the following weeks, they traveled to the 4th installation, then the 5th. Each vault revealed more of the architect's history, and each revelation was darker than the last. The architects had been brilliant beyond measure. They had created wonders, devices that could heal any injury, engines that could move planets, computers that could simulate entire universes. But they had also created horrors, weapons that could unmake stars, viruses that could rewrite the genetic code of entire species, machines that thought and felt, and then went mad with their own existence. They destroyed themselves, the curator finally admitted as Juno stood in the 5th installation's central chamber. Our creators became drunk on their own power. They believed nothing was beyond their reach, that all creation was theirs to reshape. In the end, their own inventions consumed them. Juno stared at a holographic record showing the architects' final days. Their civilization, spanning thousands of worlds, had collapsed in mere years. Their creations had turned against them. Their weapons had been used by desperate factions. Within a generation, they were gone, leaving only empty ruins and sealed vaults. Why? Juno asked, why leave all this behind if it destroyed you? Because we hoped our heirs would be wiser, the curator replied. We hoped that younger species, not yet corrupted by ultimate power, might use our gifts more carefully. We hoped they would learn from our mistakes. That's a lot of hope placed on strangers, Juno said bitterly. At the 6th installation, everything nearly fell apart. The planet was under attack when they arrived. Rissa's forces and the Void Collector were fighting each other in orbit, both trying to reach the vault first. The Galactic Council had sent peacekeeping ships, but they were outmatched. Juno landed in the middle of a war zone. Explosions rocked the ground as he ran toward the installation's entrance. Hannah piloted the shuttle in desperate evasive maneuvers, while Tamine manned her single defensive gun, trying to keep enemy fighters at bay. Inside the vault, Juno found something unexpected, records of humanity's origins. The architects hadn't just randomly seeded Earth with life. They had deliberately hidden humans there, far from the galactic core, isolated and protected. Why hide us? Juno demanded. The curator's voice was quiet, almost sad. Because you were the reset button. The architects knew they would fall. They knew their power would destroy them. So they created humanity and hid you away, far from their influence. You were meant to start fresh, to develop without their technology corrupting you from the beginning. We were never supposed to find these vaults, were we? Not for many more millennia. You were supposed to develop slowly, naturally, until you were truly ready. But you found the 1st installation too soon. Fate, it seems, has a sense of irony. Outside, the battle intensified. A stray missile struck near the installation, and the entire structure shook. Juno grabbed what data he could and ran. As he burst out of the entrance, he saw the horizon drift descending through fire and smoke, Hannah pushing the old ship beyond its limits to reach him. He leaped aboard as plasma of fire scorched the ground where he'd been standing. The ship climbed desperately back toward space, hull plates glowing from atmospheric friction and weapons fire alike. That was too close, Mira said, helping Juno to his feet. There's one more, Juno replied, breathing hard. The 7th installation. That's where the Genesis engine is. The crew looked at each other. They were exhausted, wounded, hunted by half the galaxy, but they'd come too far to stop now. The engine can create or destroy worlds, Juno continued. The curator says it's the ultimate tool, the culmination of everything the architects learned. Whoever controls, it controls the fate of the galaxy. Then we make sure it's destroyed, Hannah said firmly. Or make sure it's used wisely, Tamine countered. Or, Juno said slowly, a terrible understanding forming in his mind, we make sure no one ever uses it all. He looked at his crew, his friends who had risked everything for him. He thought about the architects, brilliant and doomed. He thought about all the species fighting over scraps of ancient power, none of them asking whether they should have it. I know what I have to do, he said quietly. Mira studied his face and saw the determination there. Whatever it is, we're with you. Juno nodded, grateful beyond words. The 7th installation waited at the galaxy's edge, on a dead world where the architect had hidden their greatest and most terrible creation. One way or another, this would end there. The final installation sat on a dead world at the very edge of the galaxy. The planet had no name, only coordinates. Its surface was gray dust and broken rock, lit by the pale glow of distant stars. Nothing lived here. Nothing had lived here for millions of years. But above the planet, chaos erupted. 3 massive fleets converged in orbit, their weapon systems hot and ready. The Galactic Council's peacekeeping armada held position on one side, their white ships gleaming with diplomatic lights. The Void Collective's dark vessels clustered together like a swarm of insects, their hulls designed to absorb all light. And Commander Rissa's Sorik's Empire battleships formed a brutal wedge formation, their bronze armor scarred from countless wars. They weren't talking anymore. They were fighting. Plasma fire streaked between the fleets. Shields flared and died. Ships exploded in silent bursts of flame and debris. Each faction was desperate to reach the surface first, to claim the Genesis engine before their rivals. None of them cared about the cost. Through this battlefield, the horizon drift descended. The old salvage ship shook with every near miss, its shields flickering weakly. Hannah piloted with skill born of desperation, threading the vessel between capital ships that could destroy them with a single shot. "They're too busy killing each other to notice us," she said through gritted teeth. "But that won't last long. Just get Juno to the surface," Captain Mira ordered. "That's all that matters." In the cargo bay, Juno stood alone in his pressure suit. Tamien had wanted to come with him, but Juno refused. This was something he had to face alone. The weight of the architect's legacy pressed down on him like a physical thing. "Ready?" Myra's voice crackled through his helmet. "No," Juno admitted, "but let's do it anyway." The shuttle bay doors opened, and Juno dropped into the small landing craft. It fell away from the horizon drift like a stone, plummeting toward the gray surface below. Behind him, the battle raged on. Ships died. People died. All for technology they didn't understand, power they weren't ready for. The landing craft touched down near the installation's entrance. Juno stepped out onto dead soil and looked up at the structure before him. It was different from the others. Not a pyramid or a dome, but a simple doorway carved into a cliff face. No defenses, no locks, just an open entrance, waiting. This is it. The curator's voice said in his mind. The final installation, the heart of our legacy. Juno walked forward. His boots left prints in the ancient dust, the first marks anyone had made here in eons. He passed through the doorway and descended a long corridor that spiraled downward into the planet's core. The walls began to glow as he went deeper. Soft blue light emanated from the stone itself, growing brighter with each step. The temperature rose despite the planet's frozen surface above. Energy hummed through the air, making his teeth ache and his skin tingle. Finally, the corridor opened into a chamber that took his breath away. It was massive, larger than any of the previous installations, and it was filled with light, pure, brilliant light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. At the chamber's center floated the Genesis engine. It was beautiful, a sphere of crystalline material suspended in midair, rotating slowly. Inside it, Juno could see stars being born and dying, galaxies forming and collapsing, reality itself being written and rewritten. The engine hummed with power beyond comprehension, the kind of power that could reshape existence. "Take it," the curator urged, its voice intense with longing. "You are the heir. This is your birthright. With this, you can save your species. You can bring peace to the galaxy. You can fix everything that is broken." Juno took a step toward the engine. It would be so easy. He could end all wars. He could cure all diseases. He could make humanity safe, powerful, respected. Everything he'd ever wanted for his people was right there, floating before him. "Juno, don't!" Velthra's voice crackled over his helmet comm from orbit. "Please, no one should have this power. Not humans, not Kreshtar, not anyone. But think of what you could do," the curator pressed. "Think of the suffering you could prevent, the lives you could save. Isn't that worth it?" Juno stopped walking. His hand was extended toward the engine, fingers trembling. "Show me," he whispered. "Show me what the architects did with it." The curator hesitated. Then, reluctantly, it opened its memories. Juno saw the architects in their glory. They had used the Genesis engine to create paradise worlds, to cure extinction-level diseases, to bring prosperity to trillions. But then he saw the corruption begin. They started making small changes to species they deemed inferior, then larger changes. They began deciding who deserved to exist and who didn't. They reshaped entire civilizations to match their vision of perfection. And when those civilizations resisted, the architects used the engine to erase them. Entire species deleted from existence. Worlds unmade. Reality itself rewritten to remove any trace of those who had opposed them. "We believed we were helping," the curator said softly. "We believed we knew best. And by the time we understood our mistake, it was too late. The power had consumed us." Juno pulled his hand back. "This isn't a tool. It's a trap. You knew that, didn't you? This was never meant to be used." "It was meant to test you," the curator admitted. "The final test. Would you be wise enough to refuse what we could not?" Juno looked at the Genesis engine, at all the power and possibility it represented. He thought about his crew fighting their way through space to get him here. He thought about all the species tearing each other apart for this technology. He thought about the architects, brilliant and doomed by their own creation. "The test was never about being worthy of power," he said slowly. "It was about being wise enough to refuse it." His hand moved to the control panel on his wrist. Every installation had a self-destruct mechanism. The curator had shown him how to activate them, believing he would only use it as a last resort against enemies. "What are you doing?" the curator asked, alarm flooding its voice. "What I should have done from the beginning." Juno entered the activation code. "I'm ending this." "No," the curator shouted. "You don't understand. The engine could save." "It could save nothing," Juno interrupted. "The architect's real legacy isn't technology. It's the choice to build our own future without shortcuts, without godlike power. That's the only gift worth having." He activated the sequence. The Genesis engine began to pulse, its light growing unstable. But instead of a violent explosion, something else happened. The engine transformed, its crystalline structure breaking apart into streams of data. Medical knowledge flowed out, pure and simple, how to cure diseases without rewriting genetics. Clean energy designs appeared, technology that could power worlds without destroying them. Agricultural advances, water purification, peaceful applications of advanced science. All the architect's wisdom, stripped of its weapons, released freely to the galaxy. The installations began to dismantle themselves across all 7 worlds, broadcasting this information to every species with receivers to hear it. Gifts without strings, knowledge without control.